Welcome back to the county seat, our online extension of our discussion on coal. We have graciously had the guests, actually I think I conned them into staying, or I threw it to them at the last second, but they've all agreed to stay. So I would like to pick up with the low sulfur comment that we ended the show on and talk about the untapped resources in Utah. How much coal is there in this state that we can't get to because of federal regulation?
What, Chad, it brings up an interesting point, is that I'm often asked what I see as the biggest threat to the mining industry, and I really believe that the number one issue we face is access to mineral deposits. And so many land use decisions have been made that have restricted access to our important mineral resources that, just for instance, specific to coal, 60% of the coal reserves in Utah got locked up as part of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument designation.
Right on the edge of it.
Yeah.
And I think I pointed out in my last conversation last week on the show with, or just recently on the show with Congressman Stewart, if I remember correctly, the disruption of surface was about 40 acres to tap that 60% resource, and about 12 miles of road development, if I remember correctly. Are there other places like that it occurs beyond Grand Staircase?
I mean, the Alton coal mine down in that general area between Bryce and Zion has received some, they're going through that BLM leasing process and EIS process, and they received some huge number, maybe 177,000 comments on their EIS. So there's all these influences from outside of the state a lot of times trying to influence how we manage and how we live on our lands. So it's not only is it the Grand Staircase, but there's also the BLM issues associated with and that public process that often drags things out and makes investment really difficult in rural Utah, in minerals, and especially in coal.
So, before the show we were discussing that, using coal is one problem, but this environmental factor also has started to affect our ability to export it and ship it. Maybe we could take a second and discuss that. I think it's a good point that needs to be made.
Sure. We've seen a great challenge in Washington and Oregon, 3 different ports have tried to go in to export coal out of the United States. We've seen challenge on some of them. Now I've heard here today that one of them is possibly still in the works, but I know that a couple of them were shut down. And I just have to ask you, people across the United States, what do you think is going to happen with these foreign countries when we say no coal and they say no oil? It's going to affect us. The little things that we do in Washington, D.C. and spread out across the United States as far as a special interest movement, I think really affects the whole nation in the end. And I think energy-wise, this could affect us in 2 realms.
No, I mean, exporting is a challenge. I mean, you're exporting energy to another country, but at the same time, it's a market that I think is an important market to help develop, to keep those coal mines running in Utah.
And again, when we talk about that worldwide demand, you have to realize there are, I don't know how many millions, but millions of people in this world who have no access to energy, or at least inadequate access to energy. And if you think about it, the greatest source of pollution and poor health on Earth is poverty. And so in order to raise the standard of living and meet their growing energy demands, again, coal is going to have to be a part of that energy mix there.
Probably should mention, though, I mean, just lay on the table the fact that I believe that 90% of the coal that is mined in the state of Utah is used here, isn't it?
About 70 to 80% is, yeah.
70 to 80%,
Yeah.
So my last question, because we're going to run out of time here, is when we always are tending to look at the present. This is where we are now, so we have to stop using it because this is where we are now. We've cleaned up, as you had mentioned, Mark, we've cleaned up coal significantly. And there are going to be people, I know we'll get comments on this program saying that this was a very one-sided conversation about coal and that all of the negatives haven't been brought out. But are there new emerging technologies, and do you think that there will be an emerging technology that will even address the other issues that we have, as far as the CO2 and things like that?
Well, I think whether you're talking about coal gasification, coal to liquids, carbon capture and storage, all those clean coal technologies, we need to invest in research and development in the federal government. I mean, it's a national imperative that we invest in those clean coal technologies so we can research, develop, and demonstrate that next generation of clean coal.
And industry is really looking at, I mean, they can make incremental changes and improve. And they've shown it with the SOx and the NOx back in the 80s, but they can't make these huge jumps instantaneously. It's just not possible. But it comes down to how it's regulated and how it's managed. If it's managed and regulated fairly well, I think there is a lot of opportunity to improve the efficiencies and the carbon capture aspect and improve the air quality coming off those coal plants even more than we've already done.
I'd just like to mention, though, with the improvements that those power plants have made since the 1970s, they've really made some great air quality improvements. But whenever we started looking at shutting down power plants due to pollution, we thought maybe about 175 plants nationwide, right? Mm-hmm. And today there's over 200 on the list to be closed. So I would be concerned about what the future really brings. And are we really setting up a future where we'll have supply and demand for the American people to continue to produce? Are we looking at that? It's hard for me to rely on air power whenever they turn out of the wind. And it's hard for me to say, we've got these windmills out there, so we've cut our carbon footprint. Because when the windmills turn out of the wind, our coal-fired power plants are at full steam, ready to produce. So I don't think we're cutting that carbon footprint by very much right now. So I think technology is not in place to utilize the infrastructure that we put in and paid for with tax dollars. I think whenever the technology arises and we're able to utilize that to the fullest ability, those facilities will be outdated. And so I hate to see us making these investments, especially with my tax dollars, because I'm kind of frugal, but into a future that doesn't exist. I think we need to slow down, invent the future, and then put it in place. I put this out like this. It's kind of like trading in your car, giving it to them today, knowing yours will be here in a couple of weeks. You still have to go to work.
Very good, a very good analogy, and one with which we will end this conversation. Thank you all for coming over to the website to catch this last conversation. We do welcome your comments, and I'm sure there will be some, and you do that by going to our website, thecountyseat.tv. Click on our Facebook page, and there's a place for you to comment there. Thank you. We'll look for you next week on The County Seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. That's why it's important for you to be involved and understand this. Be sure to tell your friends about it, and if you like our program, tell your county commissioners. They're the ones who support it. We'll see you next week on The County Seat.